Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started now. So, welcome to our 2025 OVS VAP Training Center webinar, Rebuilding Trust, Interpersonal Healing Strategies. I'm Blake Cush. I'm the Training and Outreach Unit Chief here at OVS. And our Director B is unavailable today to join us, but she does send her best wishes. In just a minute, I'm going to turn things over to Myra. But in the meantime, I have a little webinar housekeeping to go over. We have made ASL interpretation services available for today's training. Spotlighting the ASL interpreters can be done by pinning them as a panelist. You'll see it's just right click on I think the three ellipses above their name, you'd be able to do that. But shout out to our interpreters today for joining us, Heidi and Alita. Both the Q&A and chat features have been enabled for today's webinar as well. We prefer to keep most of the communication in chat if you can, but it doesn't mean if you submit something in Q&A, we won't address it. We'll try to get to it all. We just have some videos and stuff, and while they're going on, Myra is going to, help track engagement as it occurs through the chat. So feel free to use that. Slides from today's webinar will also be made available, and a link to them will be shared after the webinar. Today's webinar is also being recorded, and it will be published on our YouTube training channel. That link, the webinar slides, a link to an evaluation, all that will also come to everybody who attended today's webinar as a post-webinar thank you email as well. So this is one of many webinars we've offered periodically through our training center. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're a repeat attendee, thank you for coming back. Our unit oversees a lot of professional development opportunities and resources, including a biennial Seeking Solutions Summit that we do and a biennial OVS conference, which is coming up this August. Stay tuned. Lots of details about the 2025 OVS conference will be coming out in the coming weeks and months. We also manage OVS Resource Connect and VAP Connect, which is our online community forum for advocates. So feel free to check those resources out. All of that is available on our website at ovs.ny.gov/training. And again, we'll post some of the links from today up there as well. So, and finally, as I alluded earlier, when you exit today's webinar, you're going to be directed to an evaluation survey on the presentation. Please take a couple minutes, give us your feedback. It's incredibly valuable, and we really do make real-time improvements based on the feedback from those evaluations. We also share them with all of our presenters, including Myra. All right, that's it for housekeeping. So without further ado, let's introduce Myra. So Myra is the co-owner and advocacy diplomat at Strand Squared, where she and her partner Russell provide comprehensive training, education, technical assistance. Myra brings a wealth of experience to her work. She's engaged with youth facing complex trauma, serious mental health issues. She's worked with young people in conflict zones, incarcerated individuals, and many victims of various crimes. She also specializes in death notifications and highlights the significance of holistic health in addressing organizational trauma. For over a decade, Myra has taught courses on violence, sexuality, applied intersectionality, and she's also delivered social justice education in a detention center focusing on issues of violence and healing. Myra is also a repeat presenter with OVS. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back Myra Strand.
All right, welcome. Thank you very much, Blake. And welcome, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here today. I'm particularly excited about this presentation because it's a nice woven tapestry of topics that I think will really help with the concept with trying to reach post-traumatic growth, which I think is a goal for us, right? So before we get started, let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. First, I want to start off with just letting you know that I have been in the field for a really long time. I know that we need training that's really specific to the work that we do. And so while most of this training really is focused on healing, we might be using some examples that elicit some kind of a response, right? So you might experience an activation. Now, typically, this is where the trainer kind of stops and says, trigger warning, we're going to talk about hard things, take care of yourself. And I agree with that. We should definitely, but I want to take it a step further. So this is probably going to be the longest trigger warning you've ever experienced. First, I want to tell you that the word trigger is going out of style, right? So I like to call them trauma echoes. And if you really just think about it, trigger, I can see why that's not the best. I mean, a lot of the post-traumatic stress disorder research comes directly from the Department of Defense. And so, the next generation of advocates in that space are just like, is this the best word? So maybe not. But there's lots of choices that we can use here. I personally like trauma echoes. But before we really understand trauma echoes, I want to reframe what trauma means. And we're going to be talking about this throughout this training. So that reframing process really is important. For that, I'm going to call upon Dr. Bessel van der Kolk.
Trauma is about heartbreak and gut-wrenching feelings. It's not about thoughts. It really is about your body getting stuck in a state of sensations that are basically intolerable. So that's sort of different from how people out there talk about trauma. It's like they say it's about a memory that needs to be digested. I don't agree with that. It's about how your body gets stuck in being frozen or in heartache and gut-wrenching feelings. And you need to really reclaim your body as a very central issue of overcoming trauma. Emotions are about physical sensations. So you feel joy in your chest. You feel joy in your movements. When your heart is broken, you feel it over here. When your gut is wrenched, you feel it over here. So emotions are really about physical sensations.
All right, I'm going to stop there. I think that that is profound. That's a really profound 2 minutes, right? I love how he says that you can go and you can go to therapy and you can talk about trauma, which is very important, but it's not everything, right? It doesn't heal you the same way because trauma actually lives inside your body. He wrote the book The Body Keeps Score. But it took me a long time to really understand what he was saying. When you experience heartbreak, you're stuck in that heartbreak. You get stuck in gut wrench. You get physical sensations. It's a physical, whole body somatic experience, which comes with some responsibility, I think,
Trauma.
for people working in this field. Now we have all these words: vicarious trauma, parallel trauma, compassion fatigue, you know, and we all know this is why we're here today, is to address some of these issues. I'm just not sure that we need fancy words for it. At work, you're being traumatized. Your worldview is changing because of what you're doing. The way that you enter into relationship has changed. The way that you parent your children, the way that you feel safe in certain spaces, or the way you don't feel safe in certain spaces. Your neural pathways are changed, and not always for the better because of the work you do. That is the definition of trauma, right? So I'll ask you again, if we experience a trauma echo in this space, what are we going to do about that? We could dismiss ourselves and go and sit someplace else, or we could take some time in that space. And I think that there's big responsibility for this. And I'm hoping by the end of this webinar, you'll be like, okay, I do see this a little bit differently. When we're trying to figure out our trauma echoes, we want to understand our responses, right? So maybe pay attention to your emotional and physical reaction when you're feeling this. Like if you experience a trauma echo, say, "Oh my gosh, I'm experiencing a trauma echo." Retrace your steps and say, like, think, what was it specifically that brought that on? Was it a smell? Was it the rise of an emotion? Was it a physical sensation? Was it a thought or a concept? Right? And then what was it? Kind of hone in on it and try to do your best to understand. Now, you can do this with a therapist or a counselor or a trusted confidant, but we all know in this space how hard it is to find therapy, right? Like there's in your community, you have this many therapists. This many are trauma informed, right? Of the trauma informed ones, there's some that work at different nonprofits, so you can gain access to those, but they're often on waiting lists. So that means you've reduced that number. Of the other ones, some of them take your insurance, some of them don't. And then of the ones that don't take insurance, they charge a fee, which they should charge a fee. Obviously, everybody should make money for what they're doing. And I think, $150 is a reasonable fee for a 50-minute session, but not all of us have that money to pay. So now suddenly you're down to here, this many therapists that kind of fit all the things, that check all the boxes for you, right? So it kind of falls flat to simply say, get therapy, right? So we have to kind of work that out through our society. So if you do experience a trauma echo, I encourage you to write it down and spend a little bit of time thinking about that. I also encourage you to think about glimmers. Did you know glimmer is the opposite of a trauma echo, right? Glimmers are basically they do the same thing. They're guided by your ventral vagal system. They make you feel safe and connected to yourself and other people. And so when you pay attention to your glimmers, you can bring a return to autonomic regulation, which is one of the key points of this particular training, self-regulation, right? Self-regulation is so important for us to understand. Self-regulation is the ability to manage your own energy states, your own emotions, your own behaviors, and your own attention in ways that are socially acceptable to help achieve positive goals, such as maintaining good relationships, learning, and maintaining well-being. Let's pause and think about this. Managing your own energy states. This is a really big ask, right? This is all about your energy, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. About managing your own emotions, which isn't easy. That's a big ask as well, and we'll unpack that. Managing your own behaviors. I don't know about you, but my behavior sometimes gets away from me, right? Like there are moments where I'm agitated and I'm in hyper arousal, and suddenly I'm just reacting to things and I'm not in charge of my behaviors in the way that I'd like to be, right? And then, of course, managing your own attention. The way I think about that is what are you paying attention to? What are your thoughts? Is it possible that you're having unproductive thoughts? Thoughts that are not rooted in compassion, thoughts that are not trauma informed, thoughts that are uncharitable to yourself or other people. Like, for example, sometimes when I pick up a fashion magazine, I'll hold the fashion magazine and I start looking at all the different pages, and my internal dialogue is like, ugh, I need to lose weight. Ugh, maybe I should dye my hair. Is this gray hair too much? Ugh, should I get some wrinkle cream? Ugh, right. And as I'm looking at the fashion magazine inside, I'm tearing my own self apart, right? So self-regulation would be noticing that I'm doing that to my own self and saying, stop, we want to push that away. And we do all this because we want to make a difference in several different ways. First, you're joining this field. You want to work in this space because you have big hearts and you want to make a difference in your communities, right? Like there's this goal that we all share of compassion satisfaction. Like ultimately, you want to come to this space because I don't know, for some of you, you've had experiences and nobody was there to help you and you want to fill that gap. For others, somebody did help you and you want it to be like them. And for others, it's because you have a spiritual calling. For others, you attended a class and you just became inspired. Like there are reasons why we come here are complicated, but most of us are here because we want to feel the compassion satisfaction, because we want to feel like we're making a difference in our world, right? We shouldn't have to be traumatized working here, but we do have to do something about it. Now, that's point number one. What's really fascinating is when we spend a lot of time learning how to take care of ourselves, then we start to heal, right? Healing doesn't have to look like magical or pretty. Real healing is hard, exhausting, and draining, right? Let yourself go through it. Don't try to paint it as anything other than what it is. Be there for yourself without judgment. Once we learn how to do that for ourselves, once we learn how to self-regulate for ourselves, once we do the things for ourselves, then we can start noticing things like post-traumatic growth. Along the healing journey, some people notice some positive changes. This is called post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is so cool because post-traumatic growth can bring about a greater appreciation of life and yourself. It can bring about deeper relationships with friendships and family. It can open doors to new possibilities, new hopes, new ideas, right? It can give you a new sense of strength and courage, and it can even deepen your spiritual growth, right? That's post-traumatic growth is after something has been experiencing something traumatic and then going through and being on that healing path and then finding possibility there. Now, this isn't toxic positivity. It's not like, ugh, thank goodness that happened to you because you wouldn't be here today. I mean, obviously, we don't want bad things to happen to people, but obviously, all of us in this room can agree bad things do happen to people. And so, if there's even a possibility of post-traumatic growth, why not go for it, right? Ways that people move into post-traumatic growth is obviously trauma-informed counseling or therapy, right? That really makes a difference. Learning about trauma and learning how to cope, learning how it impacts the body, learning how to do the things to put yourself on that healing path. And then, of course, having community and support. Now, I read one study that I thought was really profound, and it was all about human connection, heart to heart connection. And it turns out that when we experience heart to heart connection, whether it's from a therapist or a counselor or a friend, right? Any of those, anybody connects with us, when we feel seen, when we feel valued, when we feel heard, when we connect with somebody in a way that when we walk away, we receive strength and we receive, power from that relationship, right? And we're not feeling judged by our experiences. That's what connection is. And it turns out connection is the thing that helps people move into post-traumatic growth. So I want to talk a little bit about neuroscience. I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but I just want to drop one concept that I think is pretty useful. And one is the idea of neuroception. Now, neuroception is your brain is always scanning the environment, right? It's like a scanner, always. Your brain is always doing this. It's always trying to determine, are you safe or are you not safe? Right? My good friend, Dr. Chris Wilson, he's a trainer as well. He calls it mapping to safety or mapping to threat, right? So hopefully right now you all are mapping to safety. You're in your training spaces, you're watching this webinar. Hopefully your brain is telling you that you're safe in this moment and you're able to learn, take notes, do whatever you're doing in this space. You're feeling safe. Now, there's this thing called detection freezing. That's the moment your brain determines that you're no longer safe, right? It's that moment where it's like, not safe anymore. Detection freezing then puts you into mapping for threat. Now, it's really interesting how all this works. So let's talk about it. First and foremost, it's a vibe, right? We're really connected with our surroundings using our senses. If you stop and think about it, your brain never actually sees the sunset or eats chocolate cake or holds anyone's hand, right? Or hears music. Your brain never does that. Your brain is stuck inside your head. Your brain communicates with the outside world and has those kind of experiences because you have senses. Now, we always talk about the 5 primary senses: your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your hands, your thoughts, and your skin. Like all those, we think about those, but some neuroscientists assert that there's closer to over 50 different senses, right? So then your senses come in and your brain interprets the senses. Now, the way it interprets it is based off of your personal history with the world, with your own experiences with the world. And we're going to come back to that piece a little bit later because that's really important. We're going to stick a pin in that. But for now, let's think about your senses and how the senses come in. Basically, we're going to think about it as you're feeling the world around you, and then your brain translates that. So first concept I want to talk about when it comes to self-regulation, I'm going to bring in a co-presenter, and she's going to help articulate this for me because she does a better job.
What else than me? Mom, are you ready to be his friend?
Yes.
Try not to be that high up to be friends. I want everything to be low. Okay?
Okay.
Just try your best. I don't want you and my dad to be replaced and meanies again. I want you and my dad to be placed as settled and be friends. I'm not trying to be mean. I just want everyone to be friends. And if I can be nice, I think all of us can be nice too. I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm trying to do my best in my heart. Nothing else than that. I want you, Mom, my dad, everyone to be friends. I want everyone to be smiling, not like being mad. I want everything to smile. Especially when I see someone, I want them to smile. Especially Nana, everyone. I want everyone to smile. And if that's for my dad and you, Mom, I think you can do it. I think you can settle your your mean your mean heights down a little to short heights. Then it's both. Okay? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be a bully. I'm trying to be steady on the floor, not way down, on straight, on the middle where my heart is. My heart is something. Everyone else's heart is something too.
I love this. I love this so much because you know what she's explaining? She's explaining the window of tolerance, right? In her little voice, her little 3-year-old voice, she's explaining what the window of tolerance is. And this is important for us to understand when we're trying to work with people and when we're trying to work with ourselves, right? Like I want to be very clear. These ideas are for you so you can be a really healthy whole person. So you don't have to give up your life to work in this field. But these ideas are also for the people that you serve. You learn them for yourself and then you pass them on, right? We keep sharing this information so then that way we can kind of create a new world where people understand these things. Okay, so window of tolerance. When you're within the window of tolerance, when you're within this space, you're alert, you're grounded, you're clear, you're mapping to safety, you're engaged, calm, joyful, present. This is the space where all the good stuff happens. This is where safety planning happens. This is where treatment plans happen. This is where case management happens. This is where learning happens. This is where joyful connection happens. All that stuff happens within the window of tolerance. Now, sometimes when you start to get activated, right? Activation is a continuum. And so maybe sometimes your shoulders are rising and you're close up here, right? So now suddenly you have some you're close up here, right? You're in hyper arousal. Am I still connected?
You are good to go.
Okay. Just something changed and I was just like, oh, okay, so you're up here. When you're activated, you're in hyper arousal. So sometimes you can be slightly activated and your brain is saying, oh wait, I think something's happening. You're experiencing a trauma echo. If you really stop and think about it, trauma echoes are gifts, right? So imagine this at some point. At one point in your life, you were attacked by a bear, right? We're in New York, you were attacked by a bear. It was, we have black bears here and they generally don't attack people. So this was a special kind of bear who attacked you. And so you've got the bear and you're wrestling the bear and you're like, wow, and you can hear the bear growling. You can hear the snapping of its teeth, right? You can hear that. Maybe you're getting some of the bear spittle on your face. So you're feeling it. My mom would call them the vavas, right? Like you're getting vavas all over your face. Maybe you can smell the bear, right? Maybe you feel the fur of the bear on your arm and it's gristly. Maybe, there's a smell of blood in the air or that sticky sensation. Now I'm highlighting all of these things because your body's going to remember that. So you survive the bear attack and you're walking through life and then one day you smell something and it smells like the bear and you're mapping to safety and then there's that moment detection freezing and your brain says, remember that time you wrestled a bear? I smell that. I smell that. I don't know that we're safe anymore. I'm detecting something and it might be the bear. Self-regulation is saying, yes, I smell that too, but it's not a bear. What it is this guy over here needs to take a shower. We're good. We're good. We're good. And we bring ourselves back down, right? Like the trauma echo is a gift. It's a memory of something that you wrestled with in the past. It's something that happened and your body is remembering it. So then that way if you're going to be put in that situation again, you're better prepared. You're like you have a little bit of foresight. You're bracing yourself. You're ready for it, right? It's a gift in a way. But our bodies don't always have these memories really in clear ways. So it might be a smell, but the smell could be a number of things, right? And so what we do is when we start to agitate, we start to notice, and we notice that, and we stop and pause. We stop and pause. We have to notice what's happening within us to be able to do this. Now, when you get, sometimes you can get outside of your window of tolerance and go into hyperarousal, and that's when your sympathetic nervous system is really activated, and that's where it's high energy. That's when it's fear and panic and self-destructive behavior. Like that's when it's up here. But you can also go into hypoarousal, where that's where your parasympathetic nervous system is on, but too much, right? Either one of these is too much. So you could be shut down, numb to emotions, passive, withdrawn. That's where you can't get out of bed, you're depressed, right? All those things. You could lose energy, you could be fatigued. In a normal day, this is what a normal window of tolerance looks like. It's normal throughout the day to have these moments where you're agitated, to come down and kind of feel a little tired and to kind of come back up. This is a normal day when we stay within our window of tolerance, right? Like this is the normal behavior. Now, there's other things that come into play sometimes, things like trauma. And we have to understand that power and agency are the things that bring us to that post-traumatic growth. But let's think about trauma for a minute, especially lots of trauma. Now, there's definitely a lot of different ways to think about trauma. And I'm just going to hone in here because this is a 90-minute webinar and we don't have the whole day. But I want to talk about these three kinds of trauma just to kind of illustrate some difference between them. Now, it's just different. It's not like one is worse than the other. They all come with their own characteristics and impacts. I don't want to minimize this experience. That's not my goal. I just want to show the difference between this and that. That's it. We're just looking at different things. So an acute trauma is a singular incident. So think about somebody who maybe they grew up in a home where they had a lot of love. There was a lot of stability. There was plenty of food. There was plenty of resources. If they needed a math tutor, they went to a math tutor. If they had art lessons and dance lessons, all the things. They had a really healthy childhood. Then they go off to college, and we all know during college, during the first 2 weeks of college, that's called the red zone. And statistically, that's the highest probability that somebody will experience an assault is during the red zone. So Thursday at 10 o'clock, they experience a sexual assault. They go to the rape crisis center and they have a forensic exam, right? And then they talk to a forensic interviewer, and that interviewer gathers the experience Thursday at 10 o'clock. There's an investigation done Thursday at 10 o'clock. There's a scene to process Thursday at 10 o'clock. There are witnesses to interview Thursday at 10 o'clock. There's a prosecutor who comes and that's Thursday at 10 o'clock, right? Like they're all focused Thursday at 10 o'clock. Now, that's an acute trauma. Now, obviously, there's a lot of impact there. There's a lot of pain there. There's a lot that can happen because of that. So this isn't weighing, but I just want to show the difference. Now, chronic trauma, think about chronic trauma in terms of a domestic violence relationship. Maybe it's like 5 years long, right? And in that 5 years, there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, maybe some trafficking, some emotional abuse, some psychological abuse, some more physical abuse, some isolation. There's depression, there's stalking, there's more trafficking, there's more sexual assault, there's domestic violence, right? Like in this 5-year time period, there's all these things that are happening. And what happens in our system sometimes is somebody who's experiencing domestic violence will call and make a disclosure and say, hey, I need help. I need help. Responders will show up and they know enough to be trauma informed that they'll say, can you tell me what's happened to you? And then the victim will say, hey, okay, in 2017. And then we stop. No, I mean, what inspired you to make the call today? Right. And we take this chronic experience and we reduce it to a singular incident. Right? But it's different because it's complicated. It's longer. There's more going on in that space. It's over time. And then complex trauma is when it's a child who experiences chronic trauma and their brain is developing in this way. Now, complex trauma can also happen to adults if they end up in that chronic situation, or maybe they're experiencing polyvictimization, right? So we've got the different things that we're navigating. And part of being trauma informed, which I think is really interesting, the very first pillar of being trauma informed is safety, is to create safety, right? Now, keep this in mind, especially for complex trauma. People who have never been safely or securely held lack that visceral experience of a calmly abiding center, right? A deep sense of absolutely all right and absolutely safe. So, for safety, sometimes we ask questions like, what makes you feel safe? That's a tricky question for somebody who's experienced complex trauma because they may not have a bodily memory of safety. They might be able to articulate what feels comfortable, what feels warm, right? But they may not be able to articulate safety because for some people, the window of tolerance gets stuck, right? Now, this purple line is a human being that's regulated, is kind of in this space. But for some people, and honestly, like even responders, police officers, people who are navigating a lot of trauma, veterans, things like that, people who are here every day, um, they could get stuck in these spaces. They can get stuck in hyper arousal or they can get stuck in hypo arousal. And these are the symptoms of what those look like. When you're stuck and you're stuck up there, when you're stuck in hyperarousal, then there's a lot of anxiety, panic, hyperactivity, exaggerated startle, inability to relax, restlessness, hypervigilance, issues with digestion, flooding, chronic pain, sleeplessness, hostility, rage. When people are stuck in the parasympathetic nervous system or stuck in hypoarousal, that's where there's a lot of depression, flat affect, lethargy, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, poor digestion, complex syndromes, like all those things, we get stuck there. So there's real logic in learning how to self-regulate. And one thing I want to tell you is there's no biohacks, right? This requires a lifestyle change. And that's what makes it really hard. In order to be able to stay at that heart centered, to stay within the window of tolerance, we have to understand a few things. First and foremost, we have to reframe the way that we understand trauma echoes. Rarely do we talk about trauma echoes or triggers beyond, at the beginning of a training, we talk about it, or sometimes after the fact, we're just like, oh, I just got triggered, right? But what we want to do is we want to start recognizing that trauma echoes are woven into the fabric of relationships with other human beings. And trauma echoes don't come from talking about hard things all solely, right? Like sometimes that happens, but trauma echoes, they're memories on the body, which means they're super unique to a lot of people, right? Trauma echoes can come from bodily functions, from pain, right? Like knee pain, ankle pain. Suddenly that's a body memory from another point in time, from feelings of tenderness. But here's what gets tricky too, is sometimes trauma echoes are attached to sensations or to feelings, right? So when anger rises, that feeling of anger is a trauma echo to something else: rejection, humiliation, shame, sadness, right? Emotions are quite complicated when it comes to trauma echoes. Emotions are quite complicated, period. And we're going to talk about that next because that's important for us to understand. I love this quote. Maybe the most difficult part of having been traumatized is dealing with the trauma echoes that live inside, dealing with the triggers that live within inside. So let's talk about emotions here for just a second. Sorry, that's my dog. He just crashed into the desk. Okay, so let's talk about trauma echoes. Now, for a long time, I used to teach people to focus on feelings. Let's spend some time focusing on feelings. When people are agitated, focus on the feelings. And then, of course, Brene Brown, I'm telling you, every time she writes a book, I have to change everything that I'm doing. She wrote a book called Atlas of the Heart. What I loved about Atlas of the Heart is that she did a longitudinal study where she found that the average human being, so the average human being, she's not even looking at people who have experienced trauma specifically, although most people have, right? The average human being can only identify when they're feeling angry, sad, or happy in the moment that they're feeling it. That's the emotional range of the average human in the United States. And I think that that's really compelling, right? And yes, I actually give that book as as a gift often as well because it's a really big deal. Now on Etsy, I bought this image. Did you know you could buy images on Etsy? I had no idea, right? So I bought this image on Etsy, and this is basically the book Atlas of the Heart mapped out, right? The image was created by a person named Erin Mowdy in 2023. And this is how the book is laid out. It's like the places we go when life is good, when we're with other people, when the heart is open, right? And it kind of goes like that. So what Brene Brown wants to do here is complicate um, our emotional experience, is to help us develop out our emotional language, right? Because if we have words to describe how we're feeling, we're going to be able to self-regulate easier. We're going to be able to communicate easier, lots of things. Now, one that really struck me, just to give you an example, the places we go when life is good. You might feel joy, happiness, calm, contentment, gratitude, foreboding joy. Now, foreboding joy was for me was this moment where I had to pause and sit down and be like, whoa, foreboding joy. Because I was constantly waiting for the other shoe to fall. Like sometimes I would be in my room. Like one time my husband came home and I was literally crying and he was just like, what's going on? You know, tell me about what's happening. And I was crying because I was thinking my life is really good right now. I have a wonderful house. I have a great partner. I have a wonderful family. When is the next shoe going to drop? When is the earth going to open up? Somebody that I love is going to die. When is, you know, something going to happen? And I would get myself so wound up experiencing foreboding joy. It's like I'm holding on to my joy so much that I would get scared and start thinking about all the ways that my joy could be disrupted, right? Now that I have language for that, I can feel it when it rises, foreboding joy. And I can say, foreboding joy, I understand there's a lot of ways my life can fall apart. I'm going to go ahead and cross that bridge when I get to it and then push it off. And sometimes it requires several pushes to make that happen. But now I don't feel enslaved by that foreboding joy. I can I can calm myself down. I can self-regulate and I can just say to myself, you know what? I can feel that when I feel that. So a lot of times when you're working with people, because people can't they don't have that emotional range, right? Like they might be showing you anger or their trauma echo is attached to anger, but it's not actually anger. It's rejection, it's guilt, it's frustration, it's helplessness, right? Like you can't actually trust the emotions you can see. And we can't trust ourselves to say what our emotions are because most of us haven't really gone down this road, right? Like since I've read this book, I've been spending a lot of time trying to identify my emotions as they come up, and I'm realizing it's quite a journey to gain the language for all 87 of these emotions. And so we're kind of in the baby phases of all of that. But I do find it really hopeful. One thing I learned in that book is that hope isn't actually an emotion. Hope is a skill set, right? This is also from Brene Brown, is in order to be a hopeful person, you have to have the ability to set realistic goals. I know what I want and I know where to go. You have to be able to figure out how to achieve these goals, including the ability to stay flexible and develop alternative pathways. I know how to get there. I'm persistent. I can tolerate disappointment and I can try new paths again and again, right? Because any path is going to have complications. So we have to be able to pivot. And then, of course, we have to have agency, the belief in oneself. I can do this. And then I added the fourth one. Honestly, I added this one. Like we can have point one, point two, point three, but we have to have enough ability and oomph to get up and actually do that. Like we have to be within that window of tolerance to be able to do that, right? Now, earlier I had talked about how trauma can get in the way of feeling all these feelings. And we've talked about that. Now, once we start understanding hope and emotions, we're starting to understand the mechanisms that are involved in being able to self-regulate, being able to take control, being able to say, hey, foreboding joy, not today. You know how some people have that t-shirt, not today, Satan, right? My t-shirt would be like, not today, foreboding joy, right? To be able to do that, we have to have that power and agency. And that's where hope comes in. Hope is a skill set. And since hope isn't an emotion, it's a skill set, then it's a skill set that can be taught. And I think we're teaching hope all the time, right? Like we're teaching hope when we're doing a safety plan. We're teaching hope when we're doing case management. We're teaching hope when we're doing treatment plans. All those things are basically teaching hope. So maybe we can even say, this is what hope is. Now, this is what safety planning is. We're building hope and rise that hope palpably. And we do that using, of course, self-determination, self-efficacy, right? Like we want to do all the things that help people recognize their self-determination. You know, obviously people want to self-determine their path. Um, and then self-efficacy is that feeling that I can do it. I can act on my own behalf, right? And we do that. We do that together. Now, one thing, you know, I think in order to really truly understand this is the last piece on this, and then we're going to move into some conversation, some communication tools to be able to articulate these ideas and navigate conflict. And we're going to talk about resilience a little bit. But when it comes to self-determination, just remember, people are coming to you with lots of experiences. Every time we meet with another human being, not just clients, but coworkers, with our friends, with our family. Every time you meet with another person, they are coming with this whole history of experiences. And with every interaction, they have choices to make, right? They have choices. How they're going to respond to the stimuli that's happening in this space. And they're drawing their choices from their previous experience. That's what's really important to understand is your previous experience and history with the world really determines a lot of things, right? And so when we're on that healing path, one thing to keep in mind, see the like blue Buddha sitting right here. One thing to keep in mind when it comes to traumatic experiences, we don't totally completely heal. It's not like you can not have that experience. It's not like you can rewind um, time, right? And not have that experience. Those experiences are still with you, but we can learn how to integrate them into our core being, to our storyline, to our path in a way that doesn't impact us further, right? Like you can't change the past, but you can develop tools to walk forward and still have as much joy and happiness as you possibly can, right? And that just means learning how to do that, which is a big lifestyle change. Then we do that, and we do that so we can also help the people that we want to do it with. So self-regulation then lends to co-regulation. Co-regulation is when your presence and energy supports another person in regulating their emotions. Now, I'm not going to talk about co-regulation too much, but I am going to talk about the fact that when we work with other human beings, our energies commingle, if you will, right? Like we're connected to each other. I'm sure many of you have had some kind of some experiences like this, where somebody yells at you, you yell back, and then they yell, you yell back, and you're like yelling, yelling, yelling. That's not co-regulation, that's co-escalation. And our goal is to not co-escalate. Like that's really giving up a lot of power when somebody can escalate you, right? The ability to stay calm, even when somebody is yelling at you, is kind of a Zen superpower if you really think about it, right? When somebody is discharging emotionally in front of you, that's a really big opportunity to not engage in that space. We don't want to co-escalate. We want to co-regulate, which means that we have a calm tone. We witness other people's discharging of emotions without connecting ourselves to it. We make sure there's lots of choices in the space. We make sure there's lots of empathy in the space. You know, we do this in a private way with confidentiality and integrity. When somebody gets in your space, we just let them have it. Like, cool, take it. It's yours, right? And we're really conscientious of our body language. That's what co-regulation is. So we do both, right? Now I have this tool. I just recently updated this. So, you know, the last few years I've had a holistic self-care plan that I give to people during my trainings. You are literally the second group to get this version. So if you have any typos, if you see any typos, please let me know because I can guarantee that they're there, right? My skill set is not in editing. I have read this like 15 times. I tried to catch them all, but you know, I'm not a good Pokemon person, I guess. I just didn't catch them all. But hearing this self-care plan, first of all, when you open it, you're going to be like, whoa, this is a lot. It is a lot. Second thing is, I teach a 40-hour advocacy course, and this is actually one of their homework assignments is this plan. So there's some stuff specific to that class in the pages, like, like they have to do the first like 30 pages or something like that. You obviously don't. You're not turning this into anybody, right? And then what I want to really point out is the appendix. I'm really quite proud of the appendix. In the appendix, you're going to find 3 sets of coping mechanisms. The first set of coping mechanisms are called day-to-day balance, right? Day-to-day balance are things that you can do to get yourself to a point that when you do feel agitated, you can bring yourself back down, right? Because here's the thing is you got to try all of the different coping mechanisms till you find one that really works for you. Like maybe for you, you're going to find breathing works for you, right? You're just like breath. Breath makes you feel good. To the anonymous person with a holistic self-care plan, you can either download it on the QR plan, or at the end, I'll give you my website, and it's on my website, and you can just download it from there too. Or you can email me and I will send it to you. So here's the thing with a day-to-day balance. If breathing is the thing that works for you, then when you are within your window of tolerance, you have to practice breathing. You have to build a neural pathway. You have to practice the day-to-day stuff while you're within the window of tolerance. So then that way, when you're activated or you're going into hypoarousal, you already have the tools in your pocket to bring yourself back, right? Like I said, these are not biohacks. This is a lifestyle change. And so you have to practice. Like I've been practicing creating a safe space within my body for several years. Like now, whenever I'm starting to feel stressed out or when I'm starting to drop into hypoarousal, I go into my mountain shape, which is this yoga pose that's on the top of this image. I go into that shape and I close my eyes and I take 3 or 4 deep breaths. I've been doing this for so long that now, whenever my energy is not within the window of tolerance, I can bring myself back from wherever I'm at. I can bring myself back, but it took several years to get there. So, I'm hoping that this tool is useful for you. So there it is. Now I want to talk about hard conversations because that really plays a huge role in being able to move forward in this space. The first thing you have to have is courage.
Here's a question I get fairly often, which is how to have uncomfortable conversations. As you know, I talk about the importance of human skills. Cats don't have to work very hard to be cats. It comes pretty naturally to them. But for us as human beings, we actually have to work very hard to be human. And one of those human skills that we need to practice is how to have uncomfortable conversations. Being uncomfortable is part of being human. And sometimes discomfort is caused by something we have with another person, whether professionally or personally. There is a tension that causes discomfort. Now, there are many ways to respond to that discomfort. We can run away from it. That is an option. Avoidance is always an option. I don't think it's the best option because then it just perpetuates the discomfort or breaks relationships. The better way to deal with it is to lean into the tension. Now, there are also multiple ways to lean into tension. If you want to have a confrontation with someone, if you want to lean into that tension and have an uncomfortable conversation, too often when we don't have the skill set, it gets worse. And it explodes and becomes an argument and sometimes also ends in a destroyed relationship. So the skill of having an uncomfortable conversation is essential. This is how I do them. In fact, I just had one recently with a friend and it went like this. I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. By stating what's about to happen, it lets the person take a deep breath and know what's about to happen is leaning into tension. It also lets them be prepared and be a little less defensive. If you don't trust your skills on how to have an uncomfortable conversation, then say something like this. I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. I'm afraid of having this conversation because I'm afraid that I'll say the wrong thing or it'll come out the wrong way and make things worse. So please be patient with me as I try to fumble through this and get out what I need to tell you. But it's more important to me that I have this conversation with you and try and address this situation than avoid it because this relationship matters to me and I want to go through this with you. Can we have that conversation? And I always do that. I always ask permission. Can we have that conversation? Can I have this conversation with you now? Because they may not be in the mindset for it. They may say, yes, I want to have this conversation, but can we have it in an hour, right? So as opposed to being sprung on them. So I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. Can I have it now? Yes. Okay. Now you want to engage in something called FBI. It's just a mnemonic. You can do it in any order, but you have to have all three: your feelings, the behavior that made you feel that way, and the potential impact if the behavior doesn't change. Be as specific as you can. Feelings: do better than happy, sad, angry. I'm really frustrated, or I was put on edge, or I'm feeling distant from you, or I'm uncomfortable because. Then label the behavior that they did that made you feel that way. And again, be really, really specific. Avoid things like you always ... because they'll tell you the one time that they didn't, and now you're backpedaling. Pick the most egregious or the most recent one and talk about that situation and how whatever they did made you feel a certain way, and your fear that if that continues, or if it's not goes unaddressed, that something will happen. Maybe, there'll always be tension between us and the relationship will break. And that's exactly what I did with my friend. It's a relatively new friend. Something happened that made it uncomfortable. I said, I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. Just fumble through this with me. I don't want to, but this relationship matters to me, and so I want to have this conversation. I addressed what the situation was, and then I said, my fear is that if you and I don't lean into this now, that this little friendship, this sprouting of a friendship that we're having will get destroyed, and I would actually rather see it grow. And we had a very uncomfortable conversation, and it turned out to be fantastic because we ended up opening up to each other and revealing various insecurities and fears that were both triggered by each other. And it was just fantastic. And the relationship is even better now than it was before. So please, please, please practice and learn the skill of having uncomfortable conversations. And the way you're going to practice them is by actually having them.
By actually having them. I think that's the important thing, is we actually have to have hard conversations. We have lots of opportunities for hard conversations. We're living in a world full of hard conversations. The reason why we avoid hard conversations is because of those trauma echoes, because some conversations bring us outside of our window of tolerance, and because we don't understand the emotions associated with that. That's why all of this is so relevant together. Now, I encourage you to look at conversations in different ways. Now, there's debates, right? And we get into a lot of debates. Debates are to win disagreements. You're looking for holes in your opponent's storyline, right? It's stressed in nature. It's argumentative. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. The use of silence is weaponized, right? And there's a total rejection of feelings. So we're not even going into feelings in that space, right? It's just I'm right, you're wrong. And then, of course, there's discussions where we present ideas, but we're still seeking solutions or answers. It's still persuasive. We're still trying to build a team. We're still trying to achieve goals. We're avoiding silence and we're avoiding feelings. Then, of course, there's dialogue. I love dialogue. Dialogue is about embracing the feelings. It's about saying, like, okay, let's bring out this wheel, this Atlas of the Heart wheel. Let's bring it here and have it handy in case emotions rise. We're seeking to understand. That means that you have to listen to understand. That means you have to stop listening to reply. You have to listen to understand. You have to listen to the point where you're letting the person in front of you talk until they empty their bucket. And then when they're finished talking, there's a pause. You're pausing and saying, okay, they're done talking. Let me process what's happening here and then come up with my response, right? All you have to do is watch two people talk to notice that more often than not, the one party is not listening. They're waiting. They're like right there, like waiting for that pause so they can jump in and take on the talking role, right? Listening to understand is actually pretty rare. So we have to listen to understand. A dialogue challenges our worldviews and our biases, which I love that. Can you imagine a world where whenever we're entering into dialogue, we're thinking to ourselves, this is an opportunity for me to challenge my worldviews. This is an opportunity for me to identify my biases and evolve and change, right? Like that would be so cool. It invites a difference of opinion, because differences of opinion complicate our lens. They help us see things in a deeper way. You don't have to agree, right, with somebody else's perspective, but hearing their perspective has a lot of value in 5 different directions. We want to find that. We want to find common ground. We want to broaden our perspective. It's rooted in empathy and compassion, right? And that means we have to really understand, we really have to listen. Now, with listening, there's a couple of multi-tools that I think are just amazing, right? When and I love these with clients. This is really, this is part of like a good forensic interviewer is going to do stuff like this, but just use it in your everyday conversation. Tell me more. Say more. Tell me more about that. Say more about that, right? Like the more you allow people to empty their bucket, the better. Now, we live in a society where it's pretty common to call people out. And I think that sometimes you have to call people out. We're going to talk about why that's true. But I think more often than not, we don't want to call people out. We want to call people in. Now, I do like to use videos in my training, but most of the time I try to limit the videos to 3 minutes or less, right? Now, this video goes on to like 4 minutes. I think it might even be 5 minutes. So it's a bigger chunk in time, but I think it's worth it. This particular TED Talk, I would encourage you to watch the whole TED Talk because it's so interesting. But I wanted to show this because I think this is a key element in conversation, especially in our field.
To me. But then something happened. It became my job to help people who were leaving hate groups. And then once I got to know them, I couldn't hate them anymore. And then I got confused. I'm a survivor of racial violence, rape, and incest. And I needed to find another moral compass for my life's work. And that compass had to shift from hate to love. And so that improbable journey is why I'm here to talk to y'all today. You know, because I really, really want to build a culture and a world that invites people in instead of pushing them out. It's called a calling in culture. Now, some people really do believe that the only way to do human rights work is the way they want, you know, my way or the highway. But the problem is when many different people think many different thoughts and they move in the same direction, that's a movement. But when many different people think one thought and they move in the same direction, that's a cult. And when you treat potential allies like enemies, you're behaving like a cult, not the human rights movement. My friend Dazon Dixon Jallow, who's a very smart woman, says that she believes that calling in will be to this digital age human rights movement in the 21st century what nonviolence was to the civil rights movement in the 20th century. A new way to understand how to truly achieve justice. It's not a matter of what we do, but how we do it. Now, all of us know what calling out is. Our cancel culture, as it's called. You think somebody has done something wrong, you think they should be held accountable for it, and you think they should be punished for it. So one of those calling out examples is, I can't believe you just said that. You're racist, sexist, toxic, manipulative. With this approach, you've guaranteed one thing. With this blaming and shaming, you just invited them to a fight, not a conversation, because you're publicly humiliating them. Now, some people actually think call-outs should be used to hold powerful people accountable, and there's a lot to that. I mean, that's what the human rights movement has always done. But most people are calling others out of fear, or they're feeling that they need to belong to something. And some people think that they'll feel better about themselves if they put somebody else down. And then there's too many people, in my opinion, who think that they can become famous by defaming somebody else. Most of us want all of this violence to stop, but we don't know where to begin. And most of us stay silent because we're afraid that we'll become the next target. So even if something feels unfair, we're silent. And if you're unlucky enough to have something that you've regretted captured on cell phone or in a tweet, you're walking around with an unexploded gotcha bomb just waiting to blow up your life or your career or your reputation. I guess I need to ask, how many of us here have done something in our past that could come back to haunt us? One of my students once said, a call out is not an invitation for growth. It's the expectation that you've already grown. This is the culture we're trapped in now. On the other hand, there is calling in. Calling in is a phrase invented by Lone Tran. And basically, a call in is a call out done with love. So when you think somebody has done something wrong and you want to hold them accountable, you don't react with anger or hate. You just remain calm and look at them and say, and you can do this online and in person too. Forget that part. But you just look at them calmly and you tell them, that's an interesting viewpoint. Tell me more. With that, you've invited them into a conversation instead of a fight. And you don't have to agree with somebody to offer them loving attention. All you're admitting at that moment is that there's a possibility that they're as complicated as you are. And everybody deserves to be heard and to be respected. And if you use this call-in practices like I'm teaching, what you'll do is several things. First of all, you'll lead with love instead of anger and allow somebody else to grow. Secondly, it'll affirm your own inner empathy and your compassion. And you'll feel so good about yourself when you learn that you can grow too.
All right. I really recommend this TED Talk because she has so much more, but we just don't have time for a whole TED Talk in this training, right? So one of the things that I want to tell you is just learning to lead with love. Like, we're talking a lot about emotions here, self-regulation, everything we're talking about, mapping to safety. It's rooted in emotions. It's rooted in how you show up in this space. We want to show up with all the biggies. We want to show up with empathy, with compassion, with love, right? I really feel like the word love in and of itself is limited in its definition. When we think of love, we think of partnership, intimacy, things like that. But honestly, love can manifest itself in so many different ways. Bell Hooks wrote a book all about love, and I recommend that book, All About Love by Bell Hooks, because it is such a good book and it really expands our understanding of what this little four-letter word means. So we want to lead with love in this space. What I liked about what Loretta Ross said is that a call out is not an invitation to grow. When you call someone out, you're not inviting them to grow. You're not inviting them to evolve or giving them an opportunity to change. It's an expectation that you've already grown. Like, for example, I've been teaching for a long time. I started teaching on issues of intersectionality in the early 2000s. And now, 25 years later, I've done a lot of work in this area. I've read a lot of books. I've attended a lot of lectures. I've taken trainings and gotten additional certificates, all the things, right, that you do as a professional to be a lifelong learner. I can't expect somebody to be where I'm at in certain topics. But I can also expect that people who are walking this planet are also gathering information, gathering knowledge. It's just that their knowledge is different than mine. And that's okay, right? Like, I can't expect you to have all the things I have in my head, but I don't have all the things you have in your head. That's why we change. That's why we connect with each other. That's why we communicate with each other, because we want to meet people where they're at. This is a journey. For some people, they're just learning a lot of these things and they're working from old, outdated ideas. But if we meet them with that love, right? If we meet them with empathy and compassion and we nurture that space, then there's possibility that they can grow. Now, does calling in always work? Not always. I think most of the time it works, in my experience, most of the time it works. But sometimes you do have to call somebody out, right? When there's urgency, when there's a behavior that can be putting somebody at risk. You know, in criminal justice, we know that. Like we know that sometimes maybe there's a prosecutor who's making a really complicated decision that's going to have a really negative impact on someone's life because they don't know all of the best practices and they need a moment to like stop that. And calling out happens when there's a power dynamic, right? And you can't just have a good conversation. And then sometimes you call someone out when previous attempts of calling in didn't work, or when the relationship with the environment prevents you from doing a safe call in, right? So there's things that we have to take into consideration. And then maybe someday you'll experience being called out. And that's a biggie. How do you respond to that? How do you respond when someone calls you in? Right? How do you respond when someone says, "Hey, this relationship is really important to me. I have to have a hard conversation with you." Right? Like something happened and I really value this relationship, but I need to process this out with you because what happened might jeopardize our relationship. What do you do in that moment? Right? You can choose to armor up and be like, "No, I'm going to just be defensive and I didn't do anything wrong. Forget you." Or you can pause and say, "Okay, maybe I need time to get into the space to hear you." Thank the person for trusting you. Like when someone tells me I did something wrong, one of my first things is to take a deep breath and remind myself not to armor up because I'm good at like being like defensive. I have to take a moment to breathe and bring my defenses back down. And in that time, I tell them, "Thank you for trusting me to have this conversation. Thank you for inviting me into this conversation." If I'm not in the mental space, I'll tell them, I could use an hour or can I do this tomorrow? Right? Like I really value this, but I just need to ground before I can have this conversation so it can be productive. Right? I always listen to them as much as I can to understand. I believe their feelings that are being offered, right? I work with the intention to do better. I practice empathy and compassion. If I did harm, I try to repair that harm. I educate myself if it's a thing something because we all have to educate ourselves. I always make mistakes. And I can say that publicly because I'm sure I'm not the only one that always makes mistakes, right? We want to educate ourselves, evolve, and apologize. We don't want to ghost people, right? Like we don't want to just be like, "I'm not talking to them anymore." That's it. We don't want to do that. It turns out that it's problematic, not just for the person being ghosted, but for the person who is ghosting. Now, the ability to do these things, the ability to enter into hard conversations really does come with some certain skill sets, right? This is something to cultivate. It's all about cultivating courage. It's all about cultivating resiliency, if you will, right? Now, resiliency is a fascinating concept because resiliency basically means that in this lifetime, you're going to fall and the ground is going to open up and swallow you and you have to be able to stand, right? Like it's like Brene Brown's book Rising Strong. Like there's an assumption that bad things are going to happen and you have to be able to stand back up after that. It's about ability. Now, I want to start off by saying it's not about pulling your bootstraps up, right? What's really fascinating about that saying, bootstraps and elbow grease. From the very beginning of this idiom, the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" originated shortly before the turn of the 20th century. It's attributed to the late 1800s physics school book that contained an example: "Why cannot a man lift himself by pulling on his bootstraps?" Right? So when it became a colloquial phrase referring to socioeconomic advancement shortly thereafter, it was meant to be sarcastic, to suggest that it's impossible to accomplish, right? Like from a physics perspective, you cannot pull yourself up off the ground using your bootstraps, right? And so somewhere the meaning got lost, with "pull yourself up by your bootstraps." Apply some elbow grease. This is not possible. Resilience comes in lots of different ways. It comes with self-regulation. I love that. I love that self-regulation is one of the doorways into it, right? Self-awareness is the ability to pay attention to your thoughts and emotions. And then self-regulation is the ability to say, "All right, all right, all right, all right, I need to bring myself down. Mental agility is the ability to look at the situation from multiple perspectives and think creatively and flexibly. Like that's what mental agility means, right? And of course it comes with character. Like we have to have values and guiding principles that guide this space. And then it means that we're able to be connected with other humans. And it's a very optimistic thing, resilience, right? So we want to cultivate resilience within ourselves. Now, there's a few ways that we can cultivate resilience. Sometimes it's just about mindset. It's about understanding that human experience that we have. It's about talking to ourselves and the way that we talk to other people. We also have to recognize the intersectional experience of ourselves and the other humans around us, right? Because sometimes we can self-talk our way out of a situation, but sometimes we have to recognize that we're socially located in a complicated space within our society, and that's going to require more navigation and more community support in that area, right? Like you can't self-talk your way out of racism, right? Like you can't self-talk your way out of poverty, right? That requires more different things. So resilience, we have to keep that intersectional lens. Now, I'm just going to give you a couple of activities that boost your resilience before we close out today. So, these are just things that will help you build your own resilience, which in turn helps other people. Now, for some people, not all people are able to do this. So this is for people who are able to do this. Be very clear about that. For some people, understanding their family line makes a huge difference, right? It makes a difference to understand ourselves in that human experience as linked to the past and to the future. Like in many ways, I attended this speech a couple years ago, and one of the speakers was in high school, right? And I loved that they had high school speakers there, and she was talking about domestic violence. Now she's very young, so she gets a pass for this, obviously. But in her speech, she was talking about how problematic it was that domestic violence is still an issue, and that people older than her generation haven't done anything about it, and that basically the burden of all of the things has landed on their shoulders. That's true and it's not true at the same time, right? Like we have to understand our relationship to the history of this space. Like we have come a long way. I've been in the field for 25 years and we have made huge strides. We are definitely not where we were in the 1990s when I started in this space. We are doing amazing things compared to then. 100 years ago, obviously we were in a completely different space, and we move forward and then we slide back, right? Like some of the things that we've accomplished, we're getting slid back. But that's okay because we're powerful, we're strong, we're an army of people, right? Just in this webinar, there's 200 people. This is a little mini army, and this is one webinar. There's probably thousands of webinars like this happening. There are thousands of us in this country. We are a force to be reckoned with, right? And so we're all working together to try to create a more compassionate criminal justice system, not just you, but all of us. And we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're able to talk about intersectionality and have the ideas of diversity, equity, inclusion challenged because of the civil rights movement, because they went through that. And now we can be in this space and have this battle in our space, right? And then the next generation will have a different kind of battle in their space. That's what it means to be a human. We pass the baton. We exist in this continuum, which I think is really useful in helping to build resilience, because you don't have to change the whole world by yourself. You exist in this network full of all kinds of people. We are a force to be reckoned with. That really helps. Another thing to build resilience is short stories, right? Our brains are wired to understand short stories and to retain those stories and to have lessons from their stories. So let's watch one short story and then we're going to kind of unpack it real quick. No, wait. No, wait, that's not the one I wanted to do. This one. I want to do this one instead. That's not the one either. All right, so I'm running out of time. That's why I'm like, where's my short story that I wanted to show? Hold on one second. I found it. It's right here. Sorry. All right. So with that, I know that you couldn't hear it was just music in the back. I know the music makes it better, but when it comes to stories and short stories, right? Like we can analyze those stories to build resilience. This is one of the things that I do when I work with clients, especially like in a support group type setting, right? Like I'll bring a lot of different stories. Like I go into prison settings in Louisiana, and what we'll do is we'll watch little short stories and then we analyze the story through the sphere of control, right? And then we start talking about these and problem solving, which inherently builds empathy. It builds resilience because now we're starting to envision what it's like to fall down and to stand back up, right? The sphere of control, this is really useful. If you go to positivepsychology.com, they have all kinds of interesting paradigms to look through. So I recommend that. In the sphere of control, you really only truly have control over yourself. That's it. You're the only person you can control. You might have some influence on other people around you, right? And you might have a circle of concern where you have no control. Like you don't have control over the news or celebrities or other people, the behavior of strangers, other people's mistakes, politics, your past decisions, your past, right? And so we have to understand where we stand and where our control is. And that helps us to rise. It helps us to navigate complicated things. And then with this particular story, understanding other perspectives, training our minds to see other perspectives also builds resilience. Now, when it comes to resilience, another thing that we can do is to face fear and face falling in little things, right? Little things. Now, you'll get this slide, so you'll be able to read this over carefully. But one of the things I encourage you to do to build resilience for yourself before we close out is maybe make a list of things that you're kind of low key scared of, right? and see if you can like practice facing those fears, you know, for things that are safe, right? Like here's a whole list of things that people sometimes are afraid of, that are little things that you do have some control over, right? That you can start building your resilience, you can start finding that space. When I used to teach at the university, I used to give extra credit to people if they would go out to dinner by themselves or go out to eat alone. You know what? I just gave blood for the first time too, and I passed out too. You know, like that was one of the things that's on my list. Give blood. I've always been too scared to give blood. I passed out, you know, too. So, but I'll definitely do it again. I've got another appointment to do it again because it wasn't as scary. I just know now that I really do have to eat, right? So make sure that you're doing those things. Another thing that you can do is art, and do it, like let people see it, right? Like here's my art. I did this painting last year, and then I did this one, you know, this one is just did on an iPad, like I was just like playing with abstract art, right? And so it's a really vulnerable experience to let people see your art, and to know that you have that creative space, right? So do the things, practice the things, you know, try to do the things. A few more ideas on resilience building, you know, have programming in nature, do things in nature, rest and rejuvenation, spend time focusing on spiritual things, looking for meaning, celebrate accomplishments, right? Teach and support holistic health care, be more opportunity, you know, create opportunity and be intersectional. Like keep in mind, be intersectional. Remember that resilience is like a privilege, really. It's a privilege because some people don't have the space to build resiliency. Now, I like to end all of my presentations with something uplifting. And so I'm going to play this song. It's from The Greatest Showman. I love to end with this song. So if you see me present, it's likely you might have seen me do this video again, but I want to leave you with something powerful. And I think that the video and the song is powerful. And then I'll give you my contact information. I am not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the strongest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send the blood, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, 'cause here I come. I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. wanna cut me down. I'm gonna send a bird, gonna drown a out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, see right. All right. So thank you very much for showing up today. Here is my email address. Here's my website. If you need any of the tools and they didn't show up, let me know and I can email them to you. And I really appreciate you. Thank you for showing up. And if anyone has any questions, I can hang out for a little minute.
Awesome. Thank you, Myra. Shout out to our interpreters as well. Appreciate your time today. Give us about a day or so. Everyone should receive a post attendance follow-up email that should have recording to today's presentation. I'll include some of Myra's contact info as well, and then her slides. So we'll send it to all of you. But I will officially stop recording here momentarily, and we'll stick around for just a couple more minutes in case there's some other questions. So thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you, Myra.
And thank you for the kind words, everybody. I really appreciate you. Thank you.